Hello, this is Dr. K, continuing with the NetBeans e-commerce tutorial. In this part of the tutorial, we're going to look at page views and the controller servlet. We'll start off by looking at how to implement our welcome page in HTML using cascading style sheets. In fact, the focus of this lesson will be on the CSS content, since we're just looking to get the general layout of our pages correct here. The actual information or content that you will see in the final website is going to be added later. The first thing we're going to need to do is delete the index.html file that we have in our web-inf directory. We're going to replace that with a JSP file. When you create a new file in NetBeans, you'll find the JSP option in the web category. Name the file index and click Finish. Now, if you run the project, you'll get a web page with Hello World written on it. That's not much different from what we had before, but in order for our web server to manipulate the pages on our site and control the content that appears on them, we're going to have to make them all JSP pages. Once you have the index page, create 4 more JSP pages for cart, category, checkout, and confirmation. This is going to be the basic layout for the index page. We'll have a header, a footer, and a left and right column in between them. Here are the dimensions. As you can see, the page is 850 pixels wide and 710 pixels high. We're almost always going to want to control the width of our page, but sometimes the height of our page is kept variable. In this page, however, we're fixing the width and the height. The margins are going to be defined in the CSS Selector for the body tag. The top and bottom margins are going to be 20 pixels high. The left and right margins will increase or decrease depending on the size of the browser window, but the right margin will always have the same width as the left margin. It's easy to put one section of a web page above or below another section. You just move those sections higher or lower in the HTML code. But when we want columns, we generally implement them by making our sections float to the left or to the right. Both columns here float to the left, and the right column comes after the left column in the HTML. So the left column is up against the left side of the page, and the right column is up against the left column. Also note that the footer panel is going to explicitly clear any floating behavior that has not been set previously. Finally, we're going to color each area a different shade of gray just so we can clearly see where the divisions are when we view a page. Naturally, when the final page is presented, our colors will be much more carefully thought out. Let's take a look at the CSS code that defines the different areas of this page. Each CSS element in the code you see here is called a selector. There are 3 broad kinds of CSS selectors. There are element selectors that correspond to the tags in HTML, so that anytime you use a tag, the style from the corresponding element selector is applied. The body selector outlined here is an element selector. There are also ID selectors. These are the remaining selectors you see here. Their names are always preceded by a hash mark, like hash main and hash header. ID selectors can only be used once in a document. So the ID selector uniquely identifies a particular element in a document. Finally, if you want to use the style from a selector multiple times, you will want to use a class selector. The names of class selectors are always preceded by a dot. There are no class selectors in this code, but we'll see one soon. The element selector body defines the style of the HTML body tag. All of the web pages in our site use the HTML body tag. By default, the font used is a sans serif font. The width of the page is 850 pixels, and the text is aligned to the center. As for the margin property, when a margin property has two values, the first refers to both the top and the bottom margins, and the second refers to both the left and the right margins. The ID selector main simply sets the background color to a light gray. It turns out that the main style will also be used in every page on our site. So technically, we could have put this property in the body selector. However, sometimes it is useful to have an ID selector that encompasses the entire page in case you need to make significant modification to your website pages sometime down the road. The ID selector header sets the height and the background color for the header. And the ID selector footer sets the height and the background for the footer. Note that it also explicitly clears the left floating behavior of the left and right columns. Sometimes when floating elements are not sized properly, you'll get some unexpected behavior with subsequent elements. To prevent this, it's a good idea to explicitly clear the behavior. The left and right columns both float to the left. Their combined width is equal to the width of the page, and their heights are the same, so they fit perfectly under the header to form two columns. Notice that the names of the selectors are #index left column and #index right column, instead of #left column and #right column. That's because these selectors are only going to be used in our welcome page or our index page. There will be left and right columns on other pages, but they will have different widths. Furthermore, all of our pages are going to use the same CSS file to get their styles, so each unique style must also have a unique name. Finally, here's the HTML for those main sections we just described. Notice that the 4 distinct divisions, or sections, are all under the main section.